Alarm bar features. Let's take a closer look at that alarm bar, the blue bar at the bottom of your DataMiner cube. That's basically this one over here at the bottom. Because we mentioned during the UI introduction, you have a summary there of the number of alarms with some summary per severity. But we do have some, next to that, some buttons and some filtering options. That's what we will take a closer look at now. The first one, starting from the right-hand side, is the filter. And that's probably the most interesting one because it's so easy to use. If you want to look for something in your alarm console, that's the first thing you go to. You quickly type something in there, a keyword, and it immediately filters down your alarm list. Very powerful. Let me show you how that works. If I'm looking, for instance, for that WMI alarm and how many I have in my system, I just type in there WMI and immediately it shows me all the WMI alarms. You can see there are 8 filtered, so I have 8 filtered alarms in my window there. So that's really powerful. That's timeouts that I have in my system, so I can just start to type timeout. I immediately see that timeout in there. If I'm looking for an alarm on an IRD, I will have a bunch of IRD alarms in there as well. So you really type any kind of keyword and immediately it pops up a filtered list. But it also shows you, as you can see here, if I remove myself, the suggestions. So it comes up with some nice suggestions. If I type something, it will immediately auto-complete my words. But you also notice, like the second item there, severity : critical. Well, actually, that allows you to filter within one specific column. Because typically, if I would just type a keyword, it will look in any of the columns of my cube or alarm console. But if I want to specifically search within one column, you can prefix it with the name of the column and column. Let me show you why that could be so important. If I, for instance, start searching for critical, you will notice I only have critical alarms. Okay, that's perfect. Let's go for major. Whoa, we actually see that we have some critical alarms here. So the severity, as indicated here, is critical. And still it shows that, well, you can actually see it highlights where it finds the match. And it actually found a match of major here in the alarm type. So this alarm was previously a major alarm, but it escalated towards a critical. So the alarm type still mentions escalated from major. So that's why we are still having those 2 critical alarms in the current view. So if I want to fix that, I need to prefix my keyword here. But if I start typing major, you will actually see that one of the suggestions it makes is actually severity : major. And if I select that one, then it only searches for major within the severity column. So that's quite handy to have that auto suggestion there, but also that it suggests you to search within that specific column if you're looking for something. As mentioned before in other filtering UIs in DataMiner Cube, you can use the double quotes to do an exact search. If I would search for IRD space 01 without the double quotes, it would look for somewhere IRD and somewhere 01, maybe 01 even in the time. If you want to avoid that, and if you have spaces in the name, then you can use double quotes and say like, okay, I'm looking for the exact match IRD space 01. A very cool feature is pressing and holding the control and then allowing you to quickly click on certain keywords to do the searching. You notice if I did some filtering that it was popping up or highlighting the keywords that it found. Well, actually, let me remove the filter once more. If I press and hold the Control key, you will actually see that whenever I move my mouse over a certain word, doesn't really matter where, you can immediately see it highlights, it makes it clickable, and if I click on it, it immediately filters on that selected keyword. So if I look for a critical alarm and it's maybe an output alarm, then I immediately just click, and I have my filter. If I want to remove it again, I can also just do the same again, press and hold Control at all times, press and hold Control, and click again the keywords that you selected before. Of course, you could also just clear the search on the bottom right-hand side with the clear button. But that really is powerful to just quickly filter on certain keywords, remove them again, or everything with memory, for instance, etc. So that's really a cool feature. Remember that one, press and hold the Control while clicking on the keywords. Now, we do also have the possibility to do negative searching as in other pieces of the UI and DataMiner Cube. That is with the exclamation mark. So you can remove certain matches. If I want to remove the warning alarms, exclamation mark warning. There is also the comparison that is possible, and that's specifically interesting for the service impact, because I do have here a service impact column. That is the number of services that are impacted by this alarm. And I can see that some of them might have 2 or 1 or 3 or so sometimes it's difficult to just search on 2. So therefore you can, as mentioned in the slides here, say something like service impact greater than 1 or 2, and it will filter only the alarms that have an impact on a service or 1 or more, as specified. As I mentioned, you can hit the clear button next to the filter, of course, to remove your filtering again, or just remove everything from the editor. And you will notice, of course, or you probably noticed, that we have this blue background whenever we do filtering. It's also indicated in the header. That is to make it very clear that we are looking at a limited set of all the active alarms. So you might have just typed something in there and forgot about it by getting some coffee or something like that. And if you come back to the to your desk again, you might say like, okay, there's some alarms missing here, if that would not have the clear blue background. So we definitely want to make it visible and very clear that you are not looking at all the alarms, but just a subset. Okay, next to the filter, we do have the, let me show you, we do have next to the filter the RCA filter. What's the RCA filter? Well, RCA stands for root cause analysis. And let me show you with an example. And I have an example on this demo system here. So I'm connecting to the demo system here. And we do have here somewhere the root cause analysis example, where I have a number of elements that are in alarm. What we defined in the correlation module is we defined a connectivity chain. A connectivity chain basically means that we are depending or linking elements to each other, so that DataMiner knows how they are connected to each other. Because it might happen that a specific device goes into alarm and gives a bad output, and because of that, it basically generates a massive amount of consequence alarms. So then you want to add that knowledge to the DataMiner system to make clear to the operator, like, watch out, that's probably the root cause here of the problem. And if this one goes critical, then it's normal that all the other ones go into alarm as well. So that's why we can add that connectivity. So that's the root cause analysis level. Now, what's in the root cause analysis level? That is 3 numbers. So we see none.3.none on the first alarm here. We do have 3 levels. The first one is the service RCA. we can make a connectivity chain between different services. We can also then, on the second number, make a connectivity chain of different elements. And the third number, we can also make a connectivity chain inside an element between different parameters. In this case, we see that the middle number has been configured. So there is, in this case, a connectivity chain defined between the different elements. I have some elements, RCA device A, B, C, D. So the first one here on the top is RCA device A, and then it goes down the alphabet. So we can actually, if I would not see this drawing or just have a rack overview or something like that, I would not really know that, and I would just see the alarms. And then I would actually, if I take a look at the RCA level, immediately see that the RCA device A, the bottom one, is actually the root cause, because the number indicates the distance to the most probable root cause, with 0 being the root cause itself, the problem itself. That's the root cause element. And if it's 1, then it's like one hop away, device B and device C. So those two are actually one hop away from the most probable root cause, as you can see in this visual. And then it goes down to 2, 3, depending on the shortest path to that device. So because I have those that information in here, I can of course filter on that. So for instance, showing the RCA device on top with level 0, or let me go back to the default sorting on time. I do have that RCA filter as well. By default, there is no RCA filter defined, but you can say, okay, only show me the root cause alarms, 0.0.0. That's the thing that I want to focus on first. If I fix the problem on device A, the top alarm, then most probably, or the bulk of the other alarms will probably disappear, because they are typically consequence alarms of that top level alarm there. So you can use that filter, so it has the different levels in there as well. I'll go back to no RCA filter. Of course, be aware, if I go back to my active alarms in here, you will notice that there are also, of course, alarms in there where there is no RCA defined. Then, if I filter on the root cause only, it will still have those in there as well, because there is no connectivity defined. We cannot say if it's a root cause alarm or if it's a consequence alarm. We don't know that, so we just keep those visible as well, of course. But it only shows the 0 alarm, and if I remove the filter again with no RCA filter, it shows all the consequence alarms as well. But the nonce are always shown in there. Okay, so the root cause analysis filter, that's really adding additional knowledge to your DataMiner system, so that DataMiner is aware of the connectivity between those different elements, or maybe inside an element between parameters or between services. We also have the focus button. Let me show you how that works in the DataMiner system. So let's go back to our DCP DMA. You will notice that some of the alarms have an icon in front of it. The icon is the focus icon. The focus icon, that basically means that the AI was learning from your DataMiner system and saying like, okay, those alarms are probably the most interesting to take a look at, because we didn't really expect them. So they will basically take a look at different things, like making a combination of the likelihood, how likely it is to occur, but also the frequency, if it's like happening all the time very often, it's more like considered as spam, you could say. It's a little bit like a junk filter on your email. So we don't really consider it as a very important alarm if it already happened 100 times in the last 24 hours. And also the severity is taken into account. But if an alarm, for instance, only happens every hour at the top of the hour, or each day at noon, then we also expect it. So it depends on when it's happening, how often it's happening, these kind of things. So we can actually see that we have some alarms in here, like the WMI that we have been looking at before. Let me show that side panel again. So we can actually see that this parameter has been in alarm for quite a long time, and it's maybe hard to see, but you can actually see that it sometimes clears as well. So this is like continuously an alarm, and it's happening, and it's been there for ages already. So those alarms are typically not marked as a focus alarm. But what I see here is that the output gain has been marked as a peculiar one. So those are alarms that are actually like standing out, and they are the things that you need to take a look at, because this one, I don't really see it here in the in this 24-hour graph, but you would actually probably notice if we go to week to date, it has been in a good state for most of the time, and it suddenly popped up. So it was kind of like unexpected. That's a big difference with the WMI process, which is continuously going in and out of alarm in there. So the focus alarm is, you can consider it a little bit like your junk email on your mailbox. So it allows you to actually have an immediate indication of something that is unexpected that maybe you should focus at first. The other ones are a little bit more expected, and maybe you should also consider revisiting the alarm template to avoid those excessive amount of alarms or kind of like expected alarms. Okay, what else do we have? Next to the filter and the RCA filter, we do have forgot to mention, you do have that focus filter button there. So you can actually focus filter on the focused alarms as well. That's by clicking on that button. You can toggle between all the alarms or the focused alarms in there. Okay. Next to that, we do have some additional buttons there. Let me first take a look at the history slider. That's the kind of like line bar that is represented in that icon. If I click on that, it will actually open up an additional panel at the bottom of your alarm console. Let's take a look at that in our alarm console. Let me hide the side panel for a moment again and go back to just my alarm list. So by default, my list goes all the way until the blue bar. But if I select and show that history slider, you see the list goes to here, and I do have here a 24-hour graph of how many alarms were active in my DataMiner system. So you can see that the number of alarms that have been active in my DataMiner system are actually quite stable with a little bit of jitter on it. And you can see that we are currently looking here at the now. Now, this actually allows you to go back in time. It's like a rewind you can do on your alarm console. So you can just take this now, and you can just move it backwards, and you can go back to, for instance, let's say yesterday at 6 o'clock in the evening. You just drop it there, and what will happen is it will go into the history database of your alarm console, and it will show you all the alarms that were active at that point in time. It's like rewinding in time and seeing whatever people were seeing at 6 o'clock yesterday evening in that user interface here. The query might take a little bit longer because it's not taking all the alarms that happened between like 5 and 6 o'clock in the evening with a fixed time span, everything that occurred. No, it is everything that was active at 6 o'clock, and maybe it was already for a week active or a month active, but it was still active yesterday at 6 o'clock. So this alarm console shows the active alarms at yesterday at 6 o'clock. That's what you saw yesterday at 6 o'clock. If you want to specify an exact time, next to the clock or the timestamp, there's a clock icon. you can click on there and you can actually manually go to a specific date and a specific time, or you can go back to now as well. If you want to go back to now, you can also take the slider and put it all the way back to the right as well. Then I'm having my current view again. So remember that history slider allows you to take a look in a graphical way of how many alarms you generated or how many alarms were active at a certain point in time, and to quickly go back to that specific time. Remember, you can click on the clock and you can go back to now. It's clearly indicated again with the blue background that you're not looking at all your active alarms. You're looking at a history perspective at this stage. So that's clearly indicated with the blue backgrounds. Next to that, we have also 3 buttons which are toggling your view on your alarm console. By default, my alarm console shows a list of alarms. So that's the first icon that I have with those 3 series of icons there. The first icon, the list view, that's what we see by default. We've already discovered that one. The next 2 are the statistical and the report view. And the report, I'll show you the statistical in just a moment. The report view is actually what you see here. What does it do? It shows you for every element that has an alarm in your alarm console, or every parameter you can choose between those 2 tab pages. It shows in this case for every element that has at least 1 alarm in my alarm console, a timeline of the last 24 hours. So you can visually see how you got into that situation, if it was already active for a very long time, or in the 4th line here, we can see that it was green all the time, and all of a sudden the problem started to occur here. But you can also see a correlation then easily between the different elements, because if they all start on the same time, you can actually nicely correlate that together. And you can switch to the tab page parameters, of course, to also see it on a parameter level. Let me hide the history slider again for a moment now. And the first is the list view. That's what we currently have, a list of alarms. And we can go to the the report view. Let's first take a look at the report view. So you can see that quite some elements in my DataMiner system are quite static. They are simulated. Here I see some movements, some action where it recently went into a critical alarm. So you can nicely see all of that in one view. You can also go to parameter. Then it might happen like over here. We have 1 element that is being added twice in there for the attenuation and the summary state. The summary state is critical all the time. The attenuation is warning all the time. We don't really have a correlation here between the different elements now because it's a simulated environment. But you might want to check that out on your DataMiner system. So that was the report page. Let's take a look at the statistical page. The statistical page really gives you, that's the middle button, your alarm console, but summarized in a number of alarms per severity, per element, and per parameter. So in this case, the entry point is severity is selected. You can also go to element to have elements as entry point or parameters. It's basically the same thing, but a different order. If I have the severity, it will show you for all the different severities in my DataMiner system, how many alarms I have per severity, also with a graphical indication at the back. So the lighter white, you could say, at the background indicates a progress bar. Here the progress bar is a lot less. So it's really the majority of all the alarms are minor alarms. You can also see the spread over my elements, which elements are generating most of the alarms, and also the parameters, which parameters are actually generating most of the alarms. So you can see that the video bitrate has a lot of alarms. Either I have a lot of problems, or I need to take a look at this alarm threshold that I have configured there. Now you can also select, for instance, the critical, and then it will filter the elements that have those criticals and the parameters. So you can use that to drill down in there as well. By selecting something, you can filter it down. I'll immediately show you. And the last thing I want to mention also is, and that's also quite convenient, you can just double click or right click on any of those to filter. If you want to take a look at those bitrate alarms, you can just right click on it and you will immediately have a filtered alarm list of all those alarms. Let's take a look at that. The statistical view that we have here. So we can immediately see that warning is apparently the most popular severity. And if I want to investigate those, well, you can see I have most of them, or the most popular element, you could say, is the DMA info with 145 alarms, and the output gain is the most popular parameter. If I select warning, it will actually filter it down and only show you, or I click and I select the warning. It will filter down all the elements that have warnings, and it will filter down all the parameters that have warning. If I go, for instance, for critical, I will have a different view and see that output gain is generating most of the critical alarms. You can also go for the element entry point. Then you can really drill down into that DMA info. What is this thing actually generating? Well, a lot of memory alarms, a lot of warnings. So you can really have a more statistical view. Also for parameters like the output gain. Oh, that's on, I selected. That's on those devices. Most of them are major. So that's really interesting to analyze which alarms are happening on which elements or which parameters, which severities. So it gives you that kind of statistical view on there. If I want to take a look at those output gain alarms, the critical output gain alarms that I have here, you can just right click or double click, right click show alarms, and it immediately shows me all those critical output gain alarms with the necessary filter. It actually pre-populated for you. You can clear that again if you want. And of course, you can go back to the statistical view and switch back to the list by using those buttons. So remember that next to that list view, you do also have that statistical view and that reports view to take a more graphical look at your alarm console. So that was a little bit of the features of the alarm bar. So we were focusing on the blue alarm bar. We had that very powerful filter, the quick filter. That's definitely one that is very interesting. And remember that control, press and hold the control and just click on some keywords to easily quick filter on a keyword. Next to that, we also had, of course, the root cause analysis and the focused alarms, some additional filtering to really make sure that you're focusing first on the most important alarms in your alarm console. And then we had a couple of viewing buttons there with the statistical view, the report view, and we had that history slider to rewind and go back in time, of course. So that was a quick overview of that blue bar. Now we will dive into the columns of the alarm console. Okay.